But I don't know if you've ever thought about this whole thing of the odds being stacked in your favour or against you in life. There are actually people who make a profession out of this whole thing. Sometimes they're known as odds makers, and sometimes in certain circles they can be even referred to as actuaries. They're people who figure out life insurance rates. They take a gamble, as it were, on, depending on your lifestyle or my lifestyle, the things we get up to, the things that we like to do, the amount we weigh, the kind of habits we have. They figure out what are the odds on us living or dying. And so they make our premiums the rate that they do according to that. The owners and operators of insurance companies, if you're a young person here this morning trying to get insurance to drive a car, you will know the odds are stacked against you getting cheap insurance, because the insurers think that you are more likely to have an accident than an older person. There are people who can tell you mathematically that your car is 38 times more likely to be stolen if it's a Toyota Land Cruiser compared to a Hyundai. If you're driving a Renault Twingo, it's mathematically impossible for it to be stolen. You can leave the keys in it and nobody will take it. And if you've ever seen a Renault Twingo, you know why that is impossible. Some people make their living then by figuring out odds. And usually, scarily, they can be quite accurate in what they determine. But today, Easter Sunday, we actually celebrate the fact that the odds makers got it horribly wrong. Today we celebrate something that went totally against the odds. Christians today celebrate the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. The odds had been pretty stacked against him, right? But he came back to life. He defied the odds. He came back from the grave. And that's a powerful message that we need to celebrate. It's a message that separates Christianity from all the other major religions of the world. And I firmly believe, as a Christian, and as you'll hear later on in our service, Diana too firmly believes this. The message of Easter, the message of the resurrection, is a message that can change your life. It's a message that can change the way you think about everything. The way you think about God, the way you think about yourself, the way you see and perceive the world in which you live. And believe me, when you change the way you think, you will change the way that you live. This was never more evident to me than when I became a new dad. This is a picture that Sarah took of me changing Jonathan's note. You see, the reality is a lot of guys tend to think this is what changing nappies is all about. There are some new parents here this morning, and I don't know, guys, how do you approach it all? I never wanted to go near baby poo until I had my own children. And for some reason, I was more willing then, because they were my kids. Their poo didn't smell. And so I would do it. Something changed in me. I started to think differently, and so I started to behave a bit differently. Although I do have many horror stories, which I could share with you on another occasion. It can change the way you think, and it can change the way you live. Today, I hope you'll consider changing the way you think about Christianity, if you would class yourself at this point as not a Christian. I would challenge you today, on this Easter Sunday, to change the way that you think about this guy Jesus, who is at the centre of everything that we're celebrating today. And that ultimately, I would challenge you to change the way that you live. If you're one of Diana's friends, or maybe you've come with someone else and you're quite simply curious about spiritual things, as I said earlier, you may not be a Christian, but you're interested in the person of Jesus, but not really sure about Christianity. You may be asking some very honest, real life, practical questions. You may well ask yourself, come on, would trusting Jesus with my life really change everything? Would committing to follow Jesus really affect my life for the better tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next week, and the next month, and however many years down the line? In essence, would Jesus make any difference to my life? With my friendships, with my family, in my relationships with the opposite sex, or whatever? I believe, and I've discovered this for myself, that the answer on this Easter Sunday is yes. Easter is the yes message. It says yes when we ask questions like, is God good? Does God love me? Can he really accept somebody like me? If I become a Jesus follower, would there be a place for me in heaven? Do I have to be weird to follow Jesus? The answer to that one is no. The answer is always yes. But the miracle of Easter is very, very straightforward. It's something that we need to get hold of again. Jesus really died. And we believe that he died for the sins of the world. He was really buried. Dead and buried. Day 1, dead. Day 2, dead. Day 3, boom. And Jesus really resurrected. See, I believe that the resurrection of Jesus is God's ultimate proof of the supernatural. And we live in days when people are interested in the supernatural. Many people are spiritually minded, interested in things of the spiritual realm, interested in finding out more about supernatural goings-on. This is God's ultimate proof of the supernatural. It's the main event in the New Testament, a fulfillment of all that was hoped for, longed for, anticipated, what we sometimes refer to as prophesied about in the Old Testament. Hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus lived on earth, ancient Jewish tradition and writing spoke of a Messiah figure who would be unjustly killed and then rise from the dead. But it's intriguing. Ever since Jesus' resurrection, there have been movements to explain it all away. Something so longed for, something so eagerly anticipated, when it eventually happens, people want to explain it away. So there are today gazillions of theories, and some of you here this morning might tentatively hold to some of these theories as to why the resurrection never really happened, in spite of all types of evidence. So you get people today going around saying things like, well, no, you see, it wasn't an actual event. It's not a physical resurrection. It's a spiritual thing. A deeply symbolic and important thing to believe in your heart. It's nice and fuzzy and endearing, like the Tooth Fairy or Father Christmas. But can you see the followers of Jesus getting together and telling one another, I tell you what, boys, let's say, what about he resurrected? Do you think that would be a good idea? I mean, I know we'll probably be killed for all of this, but it's an important symbol, like, isn't it, to believe it in our hearts. Will that be all right with you, but? Is that really what happened? I didn't get out of bed to celebrate a symbolic gesture. I really didn't. Others want to explain it away by what's known as the stolen body theory. I love that. Jesus' mates came in and stole the body. A few problems with it. The stone that we read of being laid in front of the tomb probably weighed around 1.5 tons. There were seals and ropes, not seals as in seals, and ropes all over the stone, and if you were found breaking the seals, the punishment was death. And last but not least, there were about 16 Roman guards posted outside, and they're not sissies in miniskirts and silly potty-like helmets like in the films, okay? These are highly trained combatants. particularly well trained in hand-to-hand combat. Jesus' mates are not going to take on Rome's elite. They're in hiding. We know that they're petrified, scared, senseless, hiding in an upper room. And it's always intrigued me. Remember how the religious leaders wanted to explain what happened to Jesus' body using this reason. They actually set about trying to spread this rumour. If you were a Roman guard on duty and you fell asleep on your watch, not only you would be killed, executed, but your entire watch would be. And your bodies would be stripped, clothes would be set on fire, and the bodies of the dead soldiers thrown into the lit clothes to burn them. Happy days. Stole the body. I mean, these are the kinds of things people say happen. It's not real. It's just a symbolic gesture. Oh no, they came and nicked his body. Then you've got, of course, the swoon theory. Come across that one? Roman soldiers who were experts in crucifixion basically got it wrong. Jesus looked dead on the cross, but he was really either pretending or unconscious. Problem is with this one, of course, it's difficult to go along with this, not least because there's an eyewitness account that they plunged a dirty, great big spear through Jesus' rib cage into the lungs, probably nicked the heart as well, and blood and water gushed out, which I understand all point to a terminal condition. All a mistake. Jesus was unconscious, laid in the tomb with loads of cloves and spices to prevent decay. We know that was the custom of the day. They say that in the coolness of the tomb and with the smell of the aromatherapy going on around him, Jesus kind of came to. Oh, a few hours had passed. He thought, right, this is great. He got up, his back torn apart from the whipping that he'd received, which often killed people before they even got to crucifixion. Massive nail holes in his hands and feet, great big spear hole in his side. He hobbled over to the entrance, moved 1.5 tons stone out of the way, beat up 16 of Roman's finest, and went, ta-da! It's me! Look, I know the odds are against this thing happening. I know that to our 21st century minds it's like dead people coming alive. But that's the whole point. That's the miracle we are celebrating. This is what is at the heart of the Christian faith. We can't explain it all, but although the odds were stacked against this sort of thing happening, we believe it did. People saw him, alive and well. They could present incontestable evidence of the resurrection. We know at least 500 people saw him. If you gave them 15 minutes each, it would take a week to present the evidence at 24 hours a day. So what can we conclude? This stuff needs to be considered. This stuff needs to be looked at. It's against the odds, I grant you, but today we celebrate that Jesus really died, was really buried, and was really resurrected, came back from the dead. Had Jesus not risen from the dead, he'd be no different than any other good religious leader. But the fact that he did rise from the dead means that God has the power to change you. Just as he changed me when I was a teenager and suddenly discovered the reality of what Jesus had done for me. Just as Diana will give testimony in a little while. This has changed her life. And this means God has the power to make life better. That's what Easter's all about. See, the resurrection is the backbone of my faith. All of Christianity rides upon one event, the resurrection. If the resurrection isn't true, us being here this morning, my being here in particular, is useless and pointless. With the greatest respect to you, you have wasted your time if this stuff is stuff and nonsense. Unless you're here for the pool party. We've stopped the water now, that's good. I mean, think about it. Why would you come? Why would you bother, Diana? Why would we meet week after week? We should stay at home. If this is just bunkum, if this is just symbolic gesture, if this is just something warm and fuzzy, I'm sorry, folks, but I've got better things to do with my life. If the resurrection isn't true, the apostles were a bunch of liars. They testified and based their lives, they even died for a lie. If the resurrection isn't true, all Christianity is absolute tosh. That's the Greek word for meaningless. No Christian is better off than some guy who worships a mountain bike or a cow or a star or whatever. If the resurrection isn't true, we're stuffed. We're trapped in the rubbish that we feel so guilty about. It's what the Bible calls sin. It haunts us, it enslaves us, it robs us of so much joy in life. If the resurrection isn't true, there's no meaning. All hope is gone. All we deserve is pity. And that ultimately leaves us so empty. And if the resurrection isn't true, then frankly, all life ends at the grave. Think about that. Is that it? No. The resurrection's the backbone of my faith. The resurrection's a sign, you see, that God loves me. When you're little, love is easy to get. But the older you get, you make the painful discovery that there's less love with your name on it. Not too many people are forming a line to make you the centre of their world. Bring a baby into any gathering, everybody wants to coo at it. Everybody wants to look at it and talk stupidly to it. But the older you get, you soon discover life isn't like that. There aren't loads of people cooing over you, wanting to introduce you. Some friends stop hanging out with you. Relationships with boyfriends, girlfriends, they come to an end. Marriages, sometimes, sadly, come to an end. There can be tensions at home. Life is not all white picket fence and roses over the front door. There's an illness that can come and can dog your life. You get periods when you're not in the in crowd anymore. And you're left wondering, is there any love with my name on it? I want to tell you this morning, Easter says yes. Because of Easter. Look at that verse on the bottom of the screen. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. The empty tomb is an open door for you and for me to know that we're loved and to have a relationship with God. You know, religion is humanity always trying to be good enough to get God's attention and earn God's favour and his respect. That's why I have a real problem calling Christianity a religion. Christianity is a relationship. It's a faith-based thing. It's not about me trying to get to God. Hey, I understand. I am a lot more holy than a lot of you. But I cannot get to God. Easter reminds me, no. God comes to me. At Christmas, we celebrate the fact Jesus has come, born as a baby, the Son of God revealed in Bethlehem. Easter tells us God has done everything possible to woo us, to say, come on, I love you. I'm going to demonstrate my love for you. I'm going to take all that rubbish, that nonsense that's in your life, that human propensity to always muck things up. I'm going to shove it all on my Son. And once and for all, it's going to be dealt with. And then I'm going to claim victory over it because he's going to rise up from the dead. The resurrection proves God loves me. It proves there is love with my name on it. An empty tomb is an open door for a relationship. God is screaming at us today. I love you. I want you. I'll do anything for you. Understand that today, please. You are actually a person who is much loved. Whether or not you're aware of that, God is a relentless lover of your soul. You see, the resurrection proves nothing's impossible for God. You might be here for a variety of reasons today. What hurt are you carrying? What fear have you got? What problems are you loaded down with? I just want to say to you, nothing is impossible for God. I know some of you may well be sitting there and be quite cynical about that. You know, you can say, yeah, it is actually, you know. Some things are impossible for. I've been asking God for straight A's. I can't find a job. I don't have the friends I want. My grandparents' illness isn't being healed. Why doesn't he sort all of that then? And I want to be absolutely honest with you. I don't know. That's the truth. I don't know. I've got a small brain and I don't understand everything. My thinking is finite. But what I've grown to discover increasingly in my own life is that God is infinite. And I don't know why, but I believe he can do certain things. And I believe he has a greater orchestration for me, for my life, than I do. God has our best interests in mind. When I was a kid, my grandfather had a little workshop at the end of his garden. And I was always in and out of there doing things with him. I loved to watch him working with his vice and working on the workbench, planing bits of wood. And he'd often be repairing tools that he'd use in the garden. He'd been a farmer. You can imagine the array of tools and gadgets that he had. And one day we were in there, and there was a lovely sweet jar on the shelf. And I remember saying to him, can I have some sweets? There were these beautiful blue sweets in there. They looked lovely, just like those little aniseed seeds, sweets that you get in sweet shops. And he brought the jar down, and he opened it with much struggle. I thought, oh, he's so strong. He's going to give me sweets. And he talked me through the fact that these weren't sweets. That although they looked lovely and inviting, and although they were kept in a sweet jar, they were actually those slug pellets. And there in that moment, I learned a valuable lesson. Things sometimes look attractive. Things are often what I want. But here was somebody who was looking after my best interests. And I've come to understand in life, God is after our best interests. I don't always get why things happen, but he has my interests in mind. What keeps you from trusting God? What keeps you from trusting Jesus to guide your life? You'll hear in a moment from Diana. It's not always been easy for her. It's been a long road. But what keeps you from God's presence invading your life so that you get out of the driver's seat of life and let God take over? It's a marvellous image, isn't it? I came across this bumper sticker. God is my co-pilot. I think that sums it up. That's the problem for a lot of us. We are very happy to have God as the co-pilot. We're very happy to have God, the King of creation, the Saviour of the world, riding alongside us because, well, you know, I know where I'm going. And that's the way many of us live our lives. But you know the first followers of Jesus? They had to learn. Before the resurrection, you couldn't get them up. They were a ragtag bunch of guys, if ever they were. After the resurrection, you couldn't shut them up. Before the resurrection, they were terrified, frightened, hiding away. After the resurrection, blinking at it, they didn't care. They got stoned to death. They got crucified upside down. They got all sorts of torture done to them. Before the resurrection, they had doubts and uncertainties. After the resurrection, they had incredible confidence. Before the resurrection, they were seeking direction. After the resurrection, they were telling everybody which way to go. If life without Jesus is simply surviving until you die, and people like me put you in the ground, what is the point? Jesus wants to set us free so that we can really live. That's what we're celebrating today. That's the power of the resurrection. One last thought. When it seems that the odds are against you, that's where God does his best work, you know. He does his best work right after crucifixion.